Hey everybody, this is the Progress Report because it's Wednesday. And it's Wednesday, it's always the Progress Report. And I'm really pleased to be joined, as I am every Wednesday, unless it's the first Wednesday of the month, by my good friend Mike Farley.
Good to be back.
Good to have you
Good
with
to
me.
be back. The
As
chair
it
feels
is.
comfortable, you know.
And
A little rusty, I think, but we can.
we
shake off
are
the rust.
really, really pleased tonight to welcome back one of my favorite guests, the Dean of New Hampshire Political Reporters, who knows more political history in New Hampshire with anybody. Maybe Bill Gardner would contest him with that, but
Oh, that would be a great contest, though, wouldn't it? That would.
but with the
that would be
exception of
fun.
that, Kevin Landrigan, who started his career, I don't remember, was it with the National Telegraph?
Yes, it was. Yeah,
And
actually.
many years covering the
yes.
State House of the Telegraph,
Yep.
and then for a while with Channel 9.
With NH1 News, actually. The startup Bill Binney's kind of attempt to compete
Oh,
with
yeah.
MUR.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
Then, and then I've been with the union leader now for almost 4 years.
Imagine
Yeah,
Imagine
yeah,
that.
it's been great.
And
Covering the State House and that
covers the
little
State
room.
House, State House really well. I mean, I just wish we had more coverage of this caliber
Yeah,
of what
well-
we do up in Concord, because what we do up there affects everybody in New Hampshire. And so it's really a pleasure to have Kevin with us. And I want to remind everybody that we do welcome our callers. We are hoping you will participate because I think we're going to have a great discussion tonight. 640-3091 is the number to call.
Sure.
And we got a lot of great things to get into with Kevin Landrigan. Let's see. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself? Did I do a sufficient job? Or you?
No, sure, you did fine. Yeah.
Is there more you'd like
Yeah.
to say about your distinguished career?
Which means I'm old. When they say you're distinguished and you're the
Well, I
dean,
understand that.
all of that
I get
means
that
you've-
all the time
You've been
myself.
around a long time. I hope not too long, but this is my 10th presidential primary covering New Hampshire.
Wow.
As you know, this is the 100th anniversary for New Hampshire actually being first.
In the first primary. Back then,
right.
we elected delegates to the convention. We didn't actually elect
That's
presidents.
right.
That didn't happen until the 50s.
That's right.
At the
yeah.
very beginning, we were voting for names
Yeah,
that
you-
we might not ever have seen.
New
you know.
Hampshire
Right.
luminaries who were, then
Yeah.
going to vote for whoever.
Right.
And then we had a while when we had a mixture, when we had you voted for the delegates, but there was also a beauty contest to choose the candidate you preferred, right, Kevin?
Right. Yep.
And then what about, 50 years ago or
Yeah,
something?
it's like 1954 was the first presidential year in which
When you just voted for the guy
Right.
or the gal you wanted to be
Right.
president. It was mostly guys at that time, and has
And
been
that's
most
sort of
since.
still our distinction. Bill Gardner's kind of claim to fame for New Hampshire is ever since 1954, the person who has been elected president has won at least one New Hampshire primary.
They've had to
with
put that qualifier.
Well,
in there.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
it used to be
we've
100%.
It
but
did.
it's-
It did. But of course, we had Bill Clinton. Who sort of broke the streak, finishing second, and in '92, and becoming president. But that's it is a fact that nobody has been elected president in New Hampshire without finishing first or second here in the primary.
Yeah,
So
you have to
Still
do
an
well.
amazing record.
yeah,
Going
and I think
back-
it's
going
certainly
back that long.
right, and I think it's certainly a harbinger of, all the speculation about the presidential campaigns now, and so when you have someone like Michael Bloomberg saying, well, I'm going to skip New Hampshire, I'm going to skip Iowa, I'm going to wait until Super Tuesday and play. I mean, there's a reason why that's never worked before.
It's never worked.
And maybe
But
he'll be the
have
one
we
to,
ever had someone with the pockets he has?
That's
though? He's
true.
going to be able to drop in
That's
ads
true.
like
Yeah.
we've never seen.
No, it's true. And what's certainly different, it's in the last several presidential campaigns, we've seen this more and more. But I think this primary in 2020 is really the primary of social media. And by that I mean how dominant it is in terms of mobilizing voters, candidates communicating communicating with voters. And it's one of the reasons why we're seeing, much MUR's chagrin, and the stations in Iowa is true as well. There just isn't as much TV advertising being bought anymore, and that's
Really?
because
Well, that's really interesting.
and that's because people under 35
Don't look there.
aren't going to network television.
And meanwhile, they're sending texts
Right.
and everything else right into our pockets. Somehow
Right.
they have our cell phone numbers. I'm
Exactly.
getting info from every. I know
Yes.
every event that every campaign is offering.
Right.
You know,
It's crazy,
Right.
But
right into-
but that's how they're communicating, and I saw that, more than a year ago, when I went into one of the first events I went to for your candidate, Bob, Cory Booker, and it was out in Portsmouth, and he started the event by saying, just so we know, get a count. If you wouldn't mind sending a text message to this number, and it was the campaign's number, and
just so we can get a count.
right,
Not so we can capture your phone number
exactly.
and communicate with you for
and
the
this
rest
is,
of the campaign.
and this has become very controversial. When
Yeah.
will continue to be more and more controversial as campaigns go on. Which is to say, once they have your cell number, if they spend enough money micro-targeting through your phone, they can find out all kinds of things about you, including your profiles on social media, your Twitter account, your Facebook account, your Instagram account. And then they can also search and find out, well, what are his or her interests? What do they like? And that's why we see, and you see increasingly now, and I'm not talking about political campaigns now, just ubiquitous messages and calls you get on your cell phone. Even 3-4 years ago, you never got, right?
That's
These
true.
spam calls, robocalls,
absolutely right.
and they're happening all the time. And this is an increase, a proliferation of this. And frankly, Congress is right now still trying to figure out how do we get our arms around, this social media behemoth.
I for one, saying that a person owns his own identity would be a good statute to pass.
Right,
Let's start
right.
right there.
Yeah.
You own your own identity, and then from there, then we see what people do with it. It's property, and you own it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's a difficult issue, but we're having a hard time even
Right.
talking about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
this
true.
is fascinating, Kevin,
Yeah.
because I'm an old guy, and
Yeah.
you're not that young either, but
Nope.
you're younger than I am. But
But-
you're catching up on this much faster than I am. Does it make any sense to do phone banks anymore? Does anybody answer their phone anymore
it's true.
if they don't see that the number is somebody they want to talk to? Does anybody?
Frankly, very few people do, pick up their own phone. I've talked to people who work on campaigns, and they say the number is, with landlines, is less than 1 in 20 pick up the phone. And
Wow.
and with
about that?
with cell phones now, it's getting to the order of 1 in every 5 pick up the phone if they don't recognize the number. The number isn't in their
how do they all
contacts.
get your cell phone number so easily?
Well,
How does that happen?
well, like I say,
Well,
that's
the Booker campaign gets it, and then he
That's-
sells it to other people.
that's why all and that
Not
wasn't
just the Booker campaign,
No,
but that's,
wasn't
my
the only
point.
campaign where that occurs as well. I mean, and this is, and what they're trying to do, what they really use that for, like I said, is really also it's an organizational tool. So that it makes it easier for them to communicate if they're, say, coming into your community, and they want you to know about their event. They can send you a text message and say, just a reminder, Cory's in town, or Amy Klobuchar is having a town hall forum here at this time, and if you're interested, let us know you plan to attend.
So how do you you've been a political reporter here for many years,
Yeah.
and a very, very excellent one.
Well, thank you.
How do you deal with this? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you deal with these systemic changes in the way people communicate with their potential constituents?
Right. It does make it tricky. Also, and makes it harder for campaigns to reach out to voters and directly connect with them.
But once they do, they're really connected.
They
know
are.
a lot. You know, they
yeah.
know your friends. They can say so and so recommended that I get in touch with you. You know what I mean? They really.
Somehow I find this very frightening.
I
But that's because I'm from a different generation.
I have
No.
my trepidations as well. I mean, you know,
how-
I went online looking for sneakers, and, for the next week,
as
sneakers
a
popped
guy
up.
who still deals with the print media,
Yeah,
and
sure.
you know the that goes back a long time.
Sure.
How do you deal with it? How do you keep track of what's happening in this new world where
Well-
social media is so important?
Monitor social
Yeah,
media.
you really do. I mean, I troll on all of the social media platforms a lot more than I did even 2 years ago. And,
No kidding.
And largely, and sure, and it's a good way to. It is a good way to actually connect with folks. You see somebody commenting about this candidate or that candidate, you send them a direct message. You know, can we talk? I'm interested in your views about that, and you often get instant feedback and create a connection with somebody. And obviously, that's what the campaigns do, and that's one of the reasons why that's one of the reasons why, you know, we were talking about Congress writing the laws. One of the laws Congress has written with regard to all these robocalls, you know, that you get at home and automated phone calls, is all political speech is exempt from
Yeah.
any of those do not call lists.
Well, I
So
mean,
you can't, you literally can't.
Can't stop.
You
them.
can't stop 'em.
Can't stop them.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
there is a
Good point.
First
But-
Amendment issue
Right,
to
there is.
to
Right,
take
absolutely.
care of there. So
Right,
you know,
absolutely.
what they were able to do, they walked up to the line and they said, "Well, we're going to take care of what we can, and we'll
Right.
leave this open
Right.
for another day."
Yeah, there's commercial speech and there's free speech, and they can regulate commercial speech, you know, from a company to a consumer to a
bit.
certain extent.
Well, yeah,
You
that's
know,
true. That's
you know,
true.
when it
I
comes
mean,
to
there is a requirement for
purchasing a
truth in
product.
advertising, for
Right.
example. There's no similar
Right.
requirement for political ads.
No, there isn't.
And
No.
that's very interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Corey Lewandowski told us, no obligation to tell the truth to the press, right?
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah.
Say that.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, this is
Yeah.
fascinating, Kevin,
Yeah.
as it always is when you're here.
Well,
So, what do you think about the? I mean, you mentioned my candidate is Cory Booker.
Yeah.
I was delighted to see you there, and
Yes,
I was delighted
when he filed.
to be there
Yeah.
when he filed.
Yeah.
And here he is with more endorsements than any other candidate.
Right.
And yet he's lurking in the very bottom of the barely making the cutoffs or the debates, of which one is tonight.
yes.
And yet he seems to be entirely hopeful about his "we will rise, we'll get there."
Right, right.
Is that credible to you as with this new world that we're in? Is he on top of this? And are the others that may be in
Yeah,
his
it's really,
position?
and like we were talking about before, it's when you have such a big field like this, it is hard to get attention, and it's hard to, and that's one of the other parts about the media we live in today, not just social media, but 24-hour cable news. It's very hard to change a narrative in politics today, you know? And that's,
Once you get
again, that-
identified, maybe by Trump calling you, say,
Right.
like low energy Jeb
Right,
Bush.
exactly.
How do you ever escape that?
Right, you do. And once like I said, the 24 cable kind of ubiquitous, it's on all the time, and they've got to cover something. And so when a narrative is written about a political candidate, it's hard to undo that. I mean, a perfect example of that actually was Beto O'Rourke, the former Texas
Yeah, seemed like a
congressperson,
wonderful guy.
who got off to such a really good start, did a 10-county tour, raised a bunch of money. When he first got in this race, was really seen as a rising star in the party. He ran a credible race against Ted Cruz in a very red state like Texas. So
Yep.
people thought he would do well. And it just didn't come together. The national media was very critical of a lot of his early appearances. Some of the town halls he had, he seemed, I won't say ill-equipped, but not well-versed on some of the issues. My point is, O'Rourke only got out of this race less than a month ago. But the national narrative on 24 cable news 5 months ago was he's going nowhere. And once that's written about you, it almost doesn't matter what happens from that point forward. If particularly today, and especially in a race like this isn't like Clinton Sanders in 2016. We have two choices, and you can overcome some early obstacles because you're really only running against one opponent. When you've got voters looking at so many different candidates, once there's a negative about you, it's really hard.
How do you turn that around?
It's hard now.
And also, voters are at this point, they have their first and second choices. They're
Right.
not locked in. So,
Right.
So
Oh, absolutely.
once things start going south, though your voters look to their second choice. They
Right.
start to
They
get
do.
wobbly on you.
They do.
And that's reflected in polls.
Yeah.
And I do have to point out, he had that moment in the debate where he said, "We're coming for your guns."
Right.
Which as much as
Well,
I
not
understood
their
the
guns,
sentiment
for the assault
I
weapons.
get it. I'm not. You don't have to fight me on that. I'm
Okay.
I'm
I
on
know,
board with the
you and I
idea.
are together on this.
But it was a soundbite
Yeah,
that came
right.
around and bit him day after
Yes,
day.
it
So
did.
that I think put the nail in the coffin for him.
Yeah, I think
He
that.
didn't die immediately, but it was.
I think that's true. I also think he was, and one of the narratives about his candidacy essentially was that he appeared too opportunistic, which is to say, after the El Paso tragedies, he dramatically changed his gun control agenda and made it much more liberal. Okay, and the reaction, as I say, from many on the left basically was, well, when you were in Congress, you weren't for these things, you know, and
Well, why
and,
would-
and when you were
I've
first,
made that argument.
and when
you
you
know,
were first,
when you come to the table
You know.
after something happens to you, it's
Right.
not as strong as if you've always been there.
Right. Well,
But you know what? He
yeah,
was
I don't
praised for the way he handled
he
the
was.
El-
I,
the
He
El
was.
I
Paso
don't know.
shooting.
Right.
I mean, I just
I know
think-
we've had this debate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, after what happened in El Paso, that's hometown, the town he obviously
Right,
loves,
right.
is proud of, and him
Sure,
not to
where he's
speak
from,
out on
too.
this, I think that would have been equally devastating.
right? I know. I think that's true. Sure.
I'm not attempting
Yeah.
to be critical. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm trying
Well,
to point
we're
out
having an interesting
that
debate here. I
he,
mean, I
he
just
did a
think-
great job in the event in bringing people together
Yes.
in healing. But I think it was the reaction afterward that just tasted a little phony and
Yep.
to some people. And,
Right.
and certainly couldn't fault it. He was coming closer to my position, you know
Right.
what I mean? So
Yes.
I'm not faulting him for that, but
Yeah.
I can understand when we're Democrats fall in love.
Yeah.
We need to really feel like we can get passionate behind a particular candidate, and once we do, we're pretty strong and stay with it. I mean, look at what Bernie brought to the table 4 years later. I mean, they were
Right.
all still there.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
But I
Yeah.
don't think everybody has made that commitment yet. I think there's a lot of movement available still to come.
Oh yeah, no, I think there is, and I think.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I definitely
See,
think.
I'm not so big on that idea. You know what I mean? my candidate's Elizabeth Warren is in a better position.
I see up there it says break.
Let's do that.
okay.
That's your son, our director. No, it's time for our break.
It is time for a break.
And we're having a
Bob, we're
fabulous discussion with Kevin Landrigan, the Dean of New Hampshire Political Reporters, an insightful guy in this area like nobody else. And we're going to come right back, and we're going to talk about a lot more interesting stuff. And we want you to participate.
Please do.
640-3091. Come on, call in. We got a great show going here.
Yeah, we'll get
Be
four
a part of
four
it.
voices going. It'll
Okay.
be fun. We'll be back in a second.
Okay, we're back for the next segment. You're on.
Oh, well, in the break, we were just talking, we're going to get back to the New Hampshire primary. And Kevin, I wanted to just kind of tap your mind on your thoughts about the specifics of the New Hampshire primary, where it's a little different than other primaries. It's a state-run primary, as opposed to each party runs its own primary. And as a result of that, undeclared voter, independents, we call them undeclared voters, can come in and choose a ballot and have an impact upon the results of the party primaries, whereas in a party run, they call them a closed primary.
Yes.
And if you're an undeclared voter not affiliated with the party, you don't get to vote in the primary.
Right.
So I wonder, has that helped us have better results? You talked about our streak of always picking presidents.
Yeah.
Has it helped us stay in front of the pack as far as chronology goes? Has it, how do you think that's impacted the New Hampshire primary and its longevity?
Well, I do think one of the things, I do think presidential candidates in both political parties, that's one of the things I appreciate about New Hampshire and like about New Hampshire is they have an opportunity to, when they're campaigning in New Hampshire, even in the early stages, try kind of test out messages that could work with general election voters. I mean, as we know, primaries tend to attract the more extreme voters in both parties.
Sure, the diehards.
Right, the conservatives, Republicans, the liberal Democrats. And I think that, I do know in talking with candidates over the years, they really appreciate that about New Hampshire. Iowa, which has a first caucus, that's a closed caucus. And it's being a caucus, it's a very small universe of very politically active people. I mean, Iowa's never broken 20% turnout in any one of its caucuses, and we've never been below 45% turnout.
Many times much higher.
You're right, and many times much higher than that. Sometimes as high as 70% turnout. That much is definitely true. I think that candidates appreciate New Hampshire as a place where they can actually test messages that they may return to. It is also one of, I do think it's also one of the reasons why we remain and always have been a popular state for presidential nominees to come back to. Even back when New Hampshire was a more Republican state than it is now, back in the mid-'80s. Yeah. It was, by most accounts, Ronald Reagan called it one of those Republican states in the country back then, infamously, like before his 1984 campaign. He came back as a general election candidate, and as did the Democratic nominee that year, Walter Mondale, came back. And we see that in both political parties. They often come here, and that's one of the reasons.
It's not for electoral votes.
Right. You know? It really isn't for that. It's really for an appreciation for an electorate that's very engaged and that's very involved early on, you know.
Sure, yeah.
So here's the thing about New Hampshire, though. New Hampshire's still first among, except for the caucuses, which are continuing to be a different type of event. So our state law says no other state can be ahead of us with a similar event. So we have that dynamic. But now we have the two other states, South Carolina and Nevada. And we have the situation where in New Hampshire, and in Iowa, it looks like a guy named Pete Buttigieg, a very unlikely front runner, is now apparently maybe leading in both states. And yet, the next state he's got to go to is South Carolina, where he's apparently not having much traction. And I don't know about Nevada, but these states, I mean, talk about that. What's the dynamic here?
Yeah, I think in both South Carolina and Nevada, his problem is with minority voters.
Yeah.
And
that was the case for Bernie Sanders, in the last, 4 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, he easily won New Hampshire.
Right.
And I don't remember what he did in Iowa, but
Yes.
But he ran a cropper in South Carolina.
Right.
which
Clinton barely beat Sanders in Iowa. It was by less than 1%.
and then she creamed him in
Right.
South Carolina.
Right. And
And could that happen to Buttigieg with this situation here now? Or what do you think?
it's possible. I'm still not. I don't think the results in New Hampshire are by any means baked in. So.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
He could bubble up and
right,
drop back down.
Yeah,
It's been known
and
to happen
we've
before,
seen it,
you know,
right?
yeah.
I mean, even at this stage, we've had candidates who were really strong at this stage, like 3 months out. I mean, Chris Christie was a top 3 candidate at this time, and just flamed out. And Michelle Bachmann, infamously, like in July, the year before our primary, was actually leading in some of the polls. And this is what we see with a lot of, what's happening with, one thing that drives some of the results in the polls is paid media. And that's certainly what we see with Buttigieg.
He's got the money.
He's got the money, and he's on television, and he's spending it. He started his ads in New Hampshire about 2 weeks ago. And that's what I mean. When St. Anselm's polling is perfectly fine. They do as well as just about anybody out there. But that's the problem with the science of polling, which is to say it's always influenced by what's happening while you're doing the sample.
It's a snapshot in time.
Right. And that snapshot can be
And time is changing.
affected and adversely affected. Cory Booker hasn't been on television yet. Elizabeth Warren hasn't been on television yet. And Bernie Sanders only started this past week.
Just last week.
Yeah. So
So you think television is still important?
well, I think it can as I say, with a large field such as this, right? With a lot of voters, they're going to respond to what they've most recently seen, and that may well be a TV ad they liked. I mean, why did in the same survey that St. Anselm's did, why did Amy Klobuchar go from 2% to 6%? And the reason is she was on television, and she was on television in New Hampshire at a time when Tom Steyer was the only other candidate on TV. So,
And I've seen, I've seen Amy signs all of a sudden, not everywhere,
Right.
but they started to pop
Right.
up.
Oh, they are popping up. They are
Right.
definitely
Starting to
popping
pop
up. You're right.
up,
Yeah.
so
It does have an impact, and
It
I
does.
think it's also at this stage with so many candidates. I really think that because we're New Hampshire voters, because we're the New Hampshire electorate, we're like sponges.
Yes.
We want to have a candidate. We want to get involved in this. And, our municipals are just finishing up, and so now people are starting
Right.
to pay attention.
Yep.
We're getting into winter, and that's when we vote, you know what I mean, in the
Yes.
primaries. So I think you're going to see a lot of fluctuation
think
if
so.
you were to run a real quick series of polls. I think you'd see a lot of fluctuation as people kind of land where they're going to land, A lot of folks are locked in, the diehards, the people,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
were contacted early.
Yeah,
and
the Bernie supporters, they will
made
still
their-
be there, and I guess the Elizabeth Warren too.
They made
But back
their
to
picks.
Buttigieg, his problem as mayor of South Bend, Indiana, there have been some police shootings in that city involving black victims, and the minority community in his city has been very outspoken that he's tolerated a police management in that city for too long that wasn't respectful of African Americans.
But he also
you know.
said, "I'm sorry, I didn't get the job done,"
Right.
which I
Right.
thought was maybe it was not politically good, but I thought
Right.
it was very refreshing.
Right, and
when
yeah-
you hear a
And,
politician
and it
admit
was
a
an
mistake,
inoculation in, I think, the first debate, too,
mean, it
right?
was-
So he
Yes.
got that
I mean-
out of the way,
Yeah,
and now we
that's
can
the
move
thing
on to-
about him is that I remember a conversation I had almost 3 years ago when we were electing the last Democratic national chairman, and Ray Buckley was a candidate, our New Hampshire Democratic chairman. And that was similarly like this race. There were 9 candidates, and they had forums all over the country and before activist crowds, and ultimately Tom Perez, of course, won that race. Had a lot of Obama loyalist support. But I remember a conversation I'd had about 3 years ago with Ray Buckley, and after a couple of these debates they had, and his response was, "I don't think this guy's gonna become chairman because he's so young and he hasn't paid all his dues yet." But he said this Buttigieg is by far the most gifted guy in the race, and I didn't even know who he was talking about. Right?
Yep.
And so. And
he was among the 9 candidates for national chairman.
And he was, and he finished third in that race and did respectfully well. And it actually got him in 2016, got him a speaking part in the convention because of how well he came across.
And we've seen how a speech
Right.
at the convention can
Yes.
catapult a candidate. you know.
Absolutely.
And by the way, something that we haven't mentioned, from what I understand, I don't have a lot of connection with the Buttigieg campaign, but I understand he's got a very excellent ground game in Iowa that is pulling people.
And in New Hampshire, I would say.
And I would say, from what I'm seeing,
Right.
their
Say he
outreach
does.
certainly is very aggressive.
That's one of the things I found when I went and covered the caucuses in Iowa in person in 2000, which I thought was an interesting year. I thought of course, the Bush-Gore election, and I wanted to cover that one because I felt like it was kind of a classic race between a establishment Democrat, Al Gore, and a more liberal, progressive, kind of populist candidate, Bill Bradley. And one
he
thing
was a populist,
one thing I learned about that the caucus process, learned a lot of things about it. Fascinating. It was really interesting. I mean, people are so nice in Iowa. They're just the Midwesterners.
Are they nicer than us
Oh,
here?
totally nicer. Yeah, and just more pleasant to people they don't know. They just, and they make time for you, and they're wonderful. I really enjoyed the experience. One of the things I learned was about how in Iowa there are very distinct media markets in Iowa. It's not like New Hampshire, which is kind of monolithic. Iowa, geographically, horizontally, is a pretty wide state. And what happens is one part of Iowa is influenced by the Chicago, Illinois media market,
Yeah.
and the other part of Iowa, on the other end, is very much influenced by the South Bend, Notre Dame, Indianapolis media market, and that's one of the things that's kind of the foothold Buttigieg had when he entered this race, and that people
Oh, I see.
didn't
So
fully
he had half the state
recognize.
already
He
kinda
basically his
scoped out.
name recognition,
Yeah.
because of that, was much higher than all these other candidates like Kamala Harris and many others who've tried
The coastal candidates,
right,
pretty much, right?
Right, who've tried to introduce themselves to their voters and have had much more difficulty. But
So are you saying that Montreal media market is just not influential here in New Hampshire? I'm sorry, I sat on it as long as I could, and it just came out.
Okay.
But I can see it. It gave him a boost. But how
Yep.
does that translate now? We've seen him have a similar, about a week later, a little bit of a lag.
Yes.
Again, coinciding with his media buy.
Right.
But how does that? Is it just the media buy? What's the explanation for the name recognition? Those T-shirts that said "Boot Edge Edge." I mean, what is it that
Yeah,
brought him along in New
what
Hampshire?
led to this Buttigieg, surge?
Well,
here
like
in
I
Iowa?
said, well, again, in Iowa, of course, he did this. He kind of repeated the playbook in New Hampshire. In other words,
Okay.
in Iowa, about a month and a half out, he went on television, spent about $2 million over a 3-week period with ads, some that are similar than the ones that are running here, but some that were different, and some that were more agriculture-based
Yeah.
and more rural politics, the message that would play better over there. And he found that worked here, and so he decided to do it here. But to your point, earlier point, I think is a very good one. He's invested a lot of money in the infrastructure of campaigning. I mean, he's got 14 campaign offices in New Hampshire, which is the most of any candidate.
It's enormous.
By far.
Yeah.
He's got almost 100 paid staff in the state. And only Bernie Sanders rivals that number. Bernie has a few more than Pete, but
So you think that really makes a difference?
well, I do. In a crowded field, I think it can really help, and we're seeing that when Buttigieg goes anywhere. I mean, in New Hampshire,
Oh, people are showing up.
people showing up.
Yeah.
I mean, he generates very big crowds.
He does indeed.
But there was that filing period in New Hampshire. We had a kind of a streak of some pretty crappy weather during that period. So you can always you can overanalyze, what you see on the ground in terms of people turning out. But Buttigieg had by far the largest crowd turn out for a rally after he filed in New Hampshire, and he
Isn't
filed
that
on the
because
first day.
he's so unique? I mean, here he is, an openly gay person with
Right.
with a partner in life.
I'm not.
Chastain. I mean, he's just
Yep.
This is a really unique thing.
And
We've
he's
never
the-
had anything
right,
like this.
and he's a very young guy,
And he's
that's-
young.
He's
that's-
brilliant.
got his
I mean,
war
he's
record.
obviously brilliant.
Yes.
He's
He's
the way he
smart
speaks,
as
the way
hell.
he handles himself
Yes.
in the debates. He's very smart. Speaks well. Candidate looks. You know what I mean? I mean, he's
Right.
really got. Now is the time for him to jump
Right,
in.
but it's a good. That is one of the things that that you learn covering politics here in New Hampshire and in any state if you stay long enough, which is to say, one of the truisms about presidential politics is it's always harder to do the second time.
Really?
Meaning you
That's
even
interesting.
presidents find it harder the second time.
Yeah.
When they run for re-election, you have all this power, all these trappings of power.
So that would implicate people like Biden and.
But at the end of
and
the day,
Bernie.
it is harder to get people to go to your event if they've already seen you. And if
Yeah.
you're the same candidate
Yeah,
you
yeah,
were
yeah,
4 years
sure,
ago.
Yeah.
And that Bernie
I
has
don't
had
need to be persuaded.
Right, Sanders has had that problem here in New Hampshire. Throughout this campaign, his crowds have been much smaller than a number of people. Even Booker has drawn some bigger crowds on some
But
days.
he's a new
And-
face. He's not familiar. People
Right.
want to get out and see
They-
him.
yeah.
All those people in that crowd. This is this is New Hampshire.
Right.
And all those people. They're not convinced. They're not his voters. They're coming
Right.
to check him out, shake his hand.
Right. And with Bernie, 4 years, what's changed about Bernie? Is his message any different?
Well, that's the
Is
point of Bernie.
That's
That's the
right,
whole point
exactly.
of Bernie. He's
Maybe
been
it's his heart
So,
attack.
so if there isn't
shouldn't be
anything,
laughing at heart attacks.
I should not.
I
I'm
would
sorry.
back off. on
I'm
that.
sorry, folks. Bernie's a fine person. He would be a fine president, but he's not my candidate. Okay. All right.
I guess it's time for another break.
Time for
We're
another
blowing
break.
through this like candy.
You're really going great tonight, Kevin. We are so
This is so
pleased. you're
fun.
here. This is really fun to be with
This is a
you.
blast.
Okay, I got a few more things I want to go with you, but you'll handle them easily
okay.
because you do.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute.
We'll
Don't
be
forget
back.
to call.
By the way,
folks.
we'd like some calls. 640-391. We got the greatest guest you could have right here, right now. With the New Hampshire primary, less than, 60 days?
Yeah.
If you've
A little
ever
over.
voted in the
Little
New
over.
Hampshire
A little over
primary,
60 days away. We
can
are
call
going to
us.
select the next president of the United States right here, so be part of it.
see you in a second or two.
Right?
Okay, folks, this is the third, and that means the last segment of this week's progress report. And we could not be more pleased than to have with us
Booker
Kevin
campaign
Landrigan,
trying to get me to go to an event.
who is the Dean of New Hampshire Political Reporters, as he's been demonstrating. If you've been with us for the first part of this show, our first two segments, it's really clear that he has incredible insights into what it takes to succeed in a political endeavor in New Hampshire, including the New Hampshire presidential race, which is going on right now, and we're not that far away from voting. And I guess it's going to be February 11th. Does that
Yes.
seem pretty certain?
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
The Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, had wanted this last debate to conclude. That's
Yep.
happening tonight.
Is this the last
And-
debate tonight?
No, it's not. But he wanted this debate to occur before announcing the date, and he wanted to do it before the Thanksgiving holiday, because in terms of the printing of the ballots, if you're going to have it,
Yeah.
he's kind of waiting till almost the last moment
minute.
when in late November that he can announce the date.
Just in case.
Right, and it's always what he's done.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
always been that very deliberative and very strategic in when he announced the date to prevent states from trying to one-up us.
Yeah,
you know.
which apparently has pretty much succeeded. We don't have any, I haven't heard about any state trying to preempt us this
No,
year. Right?
no.
Well, we have California jumping to Super Tuesday, right?
Yes. Yes,
Can
and
we
we
talk
haven't-
about that a little bit?
Right.
I feel like that is going to turn Super Tuesday into just a money fest.
Yeah.
Because you
Oh,
can't
really?
be in all these places. I mean, Super Tuesday was tough enough as it was. But
Yes.
when you throw California in the mix, I think it just becomes who's got, people dump their money and go for broke.
Right, and at one point, it looked like that was going to influence our primary date. It looked like we were going to have to move up from early February because in California they allow early voting, and they allow early voting up to 60 days before their election. But we got California's legislative leadership and its governor to amend election law to essentially ensure that those ballots won't be counted until the night of that election. So people
that's
can
okay.
early vote, but nothing, no
No
totals,
influence, yeah.
and no results will be known until long after New Hampshire ends, and so that threat went away. But you're right. I mean, California is such a massive media market and such an expensive campaign state in which to run. I think it really, this will be interesting, Mike, to me, is my guess is what that's going to end up doing is going to cause many more people to exit from this race earlier than they otherwise would. Because if you're really, if you're not in the top three in either Iowa or New Hampshire, there isn't any possible way you're going to have the amount of money you need to advertise to compete in California,
Yeah.
right?
That's what I was thinking. It's just going to be so expensive.
And so,
And it
And
comes
that-
right up. They used to be at the end.
They did.
You had plenty
They
of
did.
time, and
that's why I think
Yeah.
I may be wrong. It's only a week, but my guess is we're going to see like a serial exodus of candidates after Iowa. I believe this time when we really
Mark
usually
that.
usually
That's an interesting prediction.
Usually we do not see that many drop out because they're so different, right?
Because
We talked
Iowa and New
about
Hampshire's
that.
so close.
And it's a different contest. It's a different electorate. We've talked about before.
But your costs
you
are
know,
similar.
But,
You
right.
know what I mean? You can still
Yes.
you can run a low budget campaign in New Hampshire if you've got your
They
what
are.
you have on the ground.
But what we've seen is with such a large field, so many of these candidates have already staked their claim in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Harris has dropped out.
Yeah.
Castro dropped
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
You know, a number of these candidates, even if they remain on the ballot, they're really not campaigning here the way you would see them campaign here. They're spending more time in Iowa, and the same is true, and it's vice versa as well. There are candidates spending more time in New Hampshire than there are in Iowa. So that's what will be interesting to see is whether we have even fewer to choose from by the time
You know,
February 11th.
I'm
rolls around.
reminded of when I was supporting Senator Dodd of Connecticut, and his campaign just barely didn't make it to New Hampshire. You know, he
Right.
didn't get out of Iowa.
Even though he moved to New Hampshire.
He did. It was a fun campaign. You know, working on a small campaign was a blast. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
really a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and very gregarious guy, likable
yeah,
guy,
yeah.
extremely likable
Oh,
guy.
he was
You
an
know?
excellent guy to work for, but
Yep.
but the campaign didn't make it out of Iowa, and I think that is kind of the same kind of a thing. A small campaign, you might just pack it in
Right,
rather than expend the money on a
Right.
losing cause.
right. That's
Yeah.
what'll be interesting to see. I think.
So as you
know.
look ahead at the New Hampshire vote coming up in February, we got any predictions?
It's hard to know. You know, it really is. It's
Because
I
a
think-
lot of people still got to make up their minds, I guess.
right. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think there'll be a number of twists and turns between now and the end of the election.
We might have a whole bunch of senator candidates sitting it out because they're busy in Washington.
Right. I mean,
I don't know, but by
we
February
wanted
11th,
to talk
maybe
about
not.
impeachment in this program. And the impact of impeachment. I think one thing folks need to understand about the process is certainly as the way we're seeing it now. It's because of the holiday season. It's in all. I think we can all assume at this point it's likely the House will vote to impeach, and then it will go to a trial in the Senate. And then because of the holiday season, it's likely that trial won't begin until January. And so then you've got, as you alluded to, Mike, I mean, you've got, 6 Democratic senators who are going to be
Yeah.
basically held hostage on Capitol Hill during that trial,
Yeah.
while they're still trying to appeal to voters in
Yeah.
Iowa and New Hampshire.
And while the trial
know?
is drowning out all media,
Right.
there's going to be no coverage of any
Yeah.
campaign
Well,
rallies
but
in,
on the other
in
hand, there's going to be a
Colebrook,
lot
you
of
know?
coverage of that trial, and their faces will be seen.
Right. Well, one of the, and
So
then,
so they're going to be grandstanding their pants off? Is
that's,
that what's going to?
I think that'll be interesting to see. I think that's likely. That's
Yeah, you
one
know
thing
what I
we're
mean,
going
to try to make an
There's a
impact.
number of them. I mean, Kamala Harris, former prosecutor, very good inquisitor.
Mm-hmm.
She is.
If Brett Kavanaugh, she was pretty tough on him and came
Yeah.
across very well.
Pretty tough on Biden in the first debate.
Exactly. So I think we'll see some of that. Another function is we talked about social media before. I think these candidates then are going to have to make greater use of social media to communicate. I think you're likely to see, for example, if they're stuck in Washington, they'll probably do a lot of, and this is where you can use social media, do like video town halls with voters. So they're in Washington and they packed a room in, Franklin, New Hampshire, and they're taking questions and
we can do that
connecting
now.
with voters. We can do that,
that
right?
now.
Exactly. And it can get expensive for campaigns, but I think they may well have to do it because that's the danger for the Cory Bookers and the Kamala Harrises, and Michael Bennett's, and which is with impeachment and a trial that's going to occur. Could the results we have right now look very similar to results we'll look at in January? That's the fear.
Oh, so it kind of
because-
sticks everything like
Right.
a yellow flag in a
Right.
NASCAR race.
Well, and I
Everything
think
has to
that's.
stay where
I
it
mean,
is.
look at what's happened over the last couple of weeks with all these hearings, national televised hearings on all networks, all the time, all day and
and
night.
then 4 hours of discussion afterwards.
Exactly, and then all of the cable news shows are about the hearing and
Yeah.
what they said,
Yeah,
and my point is, so the candidates are getting less airtime, and there's less coverage of the campaign, and because it's all impeachment
Yeah.
all the time. So if you're somebody who's trying to make a move, it's harder. It's much harder in this environment.
But likewise, if you're someone who's already got the name recognition, sitting kind of close to the top within striking distance,
Right.
it serves you in good stead. You probably can stay there without worrying about these other people bubbling up to kind of take the limelight. Like we've often seen. We candidate of the week, comes up and
Right.
is popular,
Right.
and then something makes a gaffe or something, or someone else is more attractive.
I mean, one thing I
You
think
know,
is
we-
one thing I think we're likely to see in New Hampshire in the primary, in the run up here, and we haven't seen it yet, is this kind of ceasefire between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. I think is going to end, because I think it has to end. If
Yeah,
you're-
I would think so.
If you're Sanders,
Yeah.
really, and it's more important for Sanders than it is, frankly, for Elizabeth Warren, which is to say, I don't think Sanders survives as a potential nominee if he loses New Hampshire to Warren. I really do not. Not after he buries Hillary Clinton. I think 4 years earlier. I
Right.
think the message then is the country's ready to move on. There's a
Yep.
a new message,
Yep.
a
Yep.
new fresh face
to carry
I mean,
the message.
Exactly. And so
The distinctions
Right.
sometimes aren't a lot of difference
There
between
aren't.
the two. So
right.
I
And so
I see what
if
you're
you're
saying.
him, you've got to figure a way to elbow her out of the picture here. And we haven't seen it yet, but I think we will see it.
Might see it tonight.
Right.
Might
It's
see it tonight.
possible. Yeah.
Kevin, the hour with you goes by incredibly fast, but I did want to raise one other quick
Sure.
issue with you.
Yeah.
We're going to elect a new governor,
Yes.
next year.
Yeah.
And we have two extremely strong Democratic contenders between Dan Feltus and Andrew Volinsky. And we have Sununu, who still seems to be quite popular, but he did have a record number of vetoes he cast this year. Do you think that can in any way come back to hurt him in the election coming up in 2020?
That's interesting. It's possible. I think it was a lot. It was a real lot. Over 50, that's a lot in 1 year.
57 to be exact.
Right. And yeah. and,
55 sustained.
right. And and that's not just a record. It blows anything out. I mean, John Lynch's were the most before that point in modern history.
That was 15, I believe.
Right, and that was when after the Tea Party election of 2010, and you had a 3-1 supermajority of Republicans in the House and the Senate. So, very combative environment for him, and he only had 15. I just feel like for Sununu, I think the state budget that he signed sort of overcame some of that animosity.
Yeah.
In other words, coming
Yeah,
to an
yeah.
agreement on a budget with a democratically controlled legislature, he resolved a number of issues some of which were contained in those vetoes. So I think that ameliorates some of it. I also think, because I've certainly found it over the years, that the voters don't get really caught up in the minutia that goes on in Concord, and
That's the truth.
they're not really influenced by it.
I wish it was otherwise.
Right, and they're not really influenced by it when it comes to the race for governor. When it comes to legislative races, you do get more in the weeds, and if this person's a taxer and that person's against abortion, then it matters and people pay attention to that. I think the race for governor, it's much more of a personality contest at the end of the day. It truly is. It's somebody, we have a very weak governor, so we have a governor who has to use the bully pulpit to really accomplish anything for himself or herself, and the effective ones really do that well. He'll be very difficult to beat, but you're right. There was two very good candidates. I think Steve Marchand, the two-time candidate for governor, former Portsmouth mayor. I think he'll run too. But
Well, that's interesting. Meanwhile, we're at the end of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Kevin,
it's been
you're
great.
a terrific guest. Thank you for coming in.
course.
I know it was on short notice.
Sure.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this
we
was
will
fun.
not
Can we
back,
go on
we
another
will be-
hour?
we could go on
This was
another.
great.
We will not be back next week because it's Thanksgiving Eve. We won't do that. But on the first weekend in December, you won't be here. I'll
I'm
ask.
afraid I cannot.
But I will have Andrew Volinsky.
And I
with
really
us.
wanted to
Oh,
be
really?
here
Oh, that
because
should be good.
And
Yeah.
we've already had Dan Feltus, and
Yeah.
we'll have Andrew with Lou D'Alessandro next week.
I think you scheduled that on purpose, Bob, but that's okay. I'm going to have
we have,
faith
we have
in
a big
you.
Volinsky supporter here. I'm a Feltus supporter. But
See what he did there? You see what he did there?
We're really very confident. We have two fine candidates.
Yeah.
Kevin, it's
Sure.
terrific for you to be here.
Oh,
We
thanks
really
very much.
appreciate your wisdom and insight.
Always a pleasure being with
It's
you guys.
unexcelled.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Good night,
Have
folks.
a great night, folks. Go watch the debate.